Okay, so we're back out at the machine. This is the control cabinet. Last time you saw this, probably had the white panel in the background. And I think the last time I talked to you about this, I misunderstood how this cabinet is set up. I was under the impression that air was going to get sucked through this cabinet. But on closer inspection, this cabinet here is completely sealed off. It is not airtight, but it is protected from the elements and from chips and all of that stuff. There's no airflow between this cabinet and outside of that cabinet, including up here. You might be able to see that there are cooling fins across the back. On the back side of that panel there are cooling fins also, but they're in a separate compartment. Air gets sucked up behind that panel through the cooling fins and blown out through these fans here, and thereby cooling this back panel, sucking the air out of this back panel, which it absorbs from the ambient heat inside of the panel. There were two fans in here to circulate the air inside of this chamber and to distribute that heat. So I thought I'd clarify. We're going to install this panel back in here. This is the one that came out of here. And then wire everything up. It's going to take a lot of effort, a lot of work, a lot of wiring to do. But when we're done, we'll have a nice panel. This will be where most of the heat is. So I'm hoping that those heat sinks back there will be up to the task of pulling the heat away. I'm considering possibly putting heat sinks on the back of this panel. What I don't want to have happen is for the VFD to heat this panel up so much that it overheats the drivers, or anything like that. So we've got to be careful of that kind of stuff. But for now, I think this is going to work, and we'll see how it goes. So let's install it. All right, now you can see I've got it installed. I did not take video because it was really rather challenging to get that in there. The next thing I need to do is get it all wired up. Now you can see that giant bundle of wires down there. I'm going to reuse a lot of those, particularly the white ones, which are shielded cables. I'd like to take a little time right now to get you caught up on where I am in this wiring process. There's a lot of wiring to do. It's taking me a lot of time. So let's look at what I've got so far. I ran into a snag today. I'm going to be taking some of this out, and I'll show you that in a second. First of all, as you can see, I've got the Gecko drives wired up down there. This larger red wire and the black one next to it here are the wires from the motor, or to the motor, I should say. I have these blue and white wires are the wires from the power supply feeding the drive. We've got some speaker wire that I'm using right here. I'm going to be replacing that later, but for now that's what I'm using. And that provides the step and direction from the computer. These wires down here they're the shielded wires that were already here. I'm using those to connect to the encoder wires, which are in the other box. I put a junction in there and put the encoder wires connected to the other end of some of these wires, and you can see like this one here and this one here. These are the A and B channel wires, and this is the ground and plus 5 volts wire for the encoders. Up here, going across the top, all these wires up here are, I apologize for the ones that are hanging down in the way. Those are the ones coming from the computer. these wires going across the top here are all the 220 volt wires and the 3 wires going to the spindle motor from the VFD, which is mounted right there. And these wires going up the side here, I left those alone. Those are the 115 volt wires going to the fans. Now, speaking of the fans, you can see the fan, I took the fans, or I disconnected them from the panel here so that I could get up behind them, and I'll show you why in just a second. In fact, let's do that now. Let's get over here, and if you can see this, you'll notice that these are the connectors. This is the wire for the encoder, and this one here is the wire to the motor itself, to run the motor. You're not going to be able to see it very well, I don't think, but right there, if you look real closely, you can see that the black motor wire is totally broken. So when I hooked this all up and started moving around, it pulled on that wire and it snapped it. That motor will not move right now. That wire is just, and you, let's see, I went to try to move this wire on, it's so stiff I can't even show you. I tried to bend that wire and it just, the covering on it just snapped. It's just old, brittle, and needs to be replaced. So, to that end, I've purchased some wires that I'm going to replace. At least I'm going to start with just replacing the motor wires, because that's keeping the whole thing from running right now. It looks to me like I'm going to have to replace this encoder one too, and I have some shielded wire for that I purchased. But I don't think I'll be doing that immediately. But I think it'll work the way it is. All right, so this wire goes back here. As you can see, if you look closely, I've disconnected the little, I don't know what you call this, conduit or whatever, the connector here. There's a rubber grommet here that keeps it from getting, from allowing things to get in there, such as flood coolant and stuff like that. Probably bugs too. And it comes in up here. Let's see if I can get some light on that with this flashlight here. So it comes in, it's the gray wire up there. That's the x-axis. So it comes in there, it comes down through the panel here, and down here. It comes in here. So I guess that's pretty much it. It shows you the wiring. Let me take you over to the other panel real quickly and show you how I hooked up the encoder wires, and that you should be up to date at that point. Alright, before I show you the encoder wires, I hooked up the black wires for the power are coming down across here. Obviously need some organization. Get my fingers out of the light there. Need some organization on those wires still, but they're coming down through here, and they're going through the side panel there and into the other panel. I removed all the other wires from this terminal block that were here, and now I have the X, Y, and Z encoder digital encoder signals going through those wires. We've got the plus 5 and 0 volts for the encoders there, and then these purple wires down here are the wires coming from the encoders themselves into the junction box. So they come in through the purple wires, they go out through those white wires, over through the side there and into that other box.